Elias lived at the edge of the forest where the trees were tall and the nights were quiet. He was a simple man, a craftsman, and he worked with his hands every day. His small workshop smelled of wood, oil, and old memories people brought him. Broken clocks, cracked cups, damaged toys, and he fixed them with care. He did not speak much, but he listened to things. He believed every broken object had a story, and every story wanted to continue. One night the quiet sky changed. A deep sound rolled across the land, not thunder, not wind. It felt like the sky itself was tearing. Elias stepped outside and looked up. A long line of fire crossed the stars. Something was falling, burning, screaming without a voice. Then the ground shook. Birds flew from the forest in fear. Dogs barked. In the village, windows rattled. The night was no longer calm. People in the village locked their doors. They whispered about war, about aliens, about danger. Some said it was a sign from heaven. Some said, "Do not go near it. Stay away from the forest," they said. "Whatever fell there is not for us." But Elias was not ruled by fear. He had seen many broken things in life, and he knew one truth: things that fall are usually hurt. And hurt things need help. So he took his coat, his lantern, and he walked into the forest. The air smelled of smoke and hot metal. Ash floated like gray snow. Between the trees he saw a strange light. Not fire, not electricity. It was cold light. Pure and soft. He followed it until he reached a wide crater in the ground. The earth was torn open like a wound. Steam rose from the broken soil. In the center of the crater lay something impossible. It was not a ship made of metal. It was not a beast with claws. It was a being of crystal. Its body was made of shining facets like gemstones. Blue, silver, and faint gold glowed inside it. Cracks ran across its surface like thin lightning, spreading, growing, threatening to break it apart. Light pulsed weakly in its chest, fading, returning, fading again. Elias felt no fear, only deep sadness. The crystal being tried to move. A soft sound came from it, like glass singing before it shatters. It was beautiful and painful at the same time. He stepped down into the crater, slow and careful. The ground was warm under his boots. The being turned its cracked face toward him. Its eyes were not eyes, only deep pools of light that trembled with pain. He spoke softly. "I am here, not." Knowing if it could understand, the being glowed weakly. Lines of light formed symbols on its surface, then broke and reformed. Finally, the message became simple. A single word formed in his mind like a bell being struck. "Help." Elias knelt beside it. He saw how the cracks spread, how tiny shards were already falling away. Every craftsman's instinct inside him woke up. This was something broken that wanted to live. It did not matter that it was alien. It did not matter that others would fear it. It was alive, it was hurting. That was enough. Behind him, in the distance, he heard voices. Villagers had followed, but stopped at the trees. They called to him. "Leave it," they shouted. "It is dangerous. It will bring trouble. Let it die." But Elias did not listen. He thought of every broken cup people had thrown away. Every old clock they had said was useless. He always hated those words. Nothing is useless if it still wants to be whole. He placed his hands near the crystal surface. It was warm like sunlight. The being flinched in pain, then relaxed. Trusting him as its light dimmed again, he spoke slowly. "I fix broken things." The being answered with a small glow, as if it understood. Elias knew he could not help it here in the open crater. He had tools in his workshop. Light, lenses, magnifiers, brushes, careful instruments made for tiny work. He lifted the crystal. Being with all his strength, it was heavy but not like stone. It felt like he was carrying light wrapped in glass. Each step up the crater wall was hard, but he did not stop. The villagers watched with wide eyes. Some crossed themselves, some turned away. Some whispered that he was mad, but nobody tried to stop him. They were afraid of the unknown. Elias was afraid of something else. He was afraid of being the man who walked away. He brought the being into his workshop and laid it on his work table. The clocks on the walls stopped for a moment, as if time itself was holding its breath. The lantern light touched the crystal body and filled the room with soft colors. Elias closed the door. Outside, the night wind moved through the trees. Inside the workshop, one human and one dying crystal alien faced each other. The fractures glowed, the light trembled, and the story of how a simple human craftsman would challenge. The cold silence of space had just begun. Morning light touched the small workshop, and soft colors moved across the walls as the crystal being slowly glowed and dimmed. Elias had not slept. He sat beside the work table with tired eyes but steady hands. He watched every small line, every crack, every tiny shimmer inside the alien body. He did not see a monster. He saw a story written in light and broken glass. The being was weak. Its glow came and went like a slow breath. Sometimes it gave a soft musical sound, like wind touching. Fragile bells. Elias listened. He had spent his life listening to things that could not speak. Clocks with worn gears, cups with chipped edges, music boxes that cried instead of sang. He thought, maybe this being was also speaking, just not in human words. He brought his tools. Close brushes, thin metal picks, small lenses, and tuning forks he used to repair old instruments. When he placed the lens over the crystal surface, he saw something strange. The cracks were not random. They curved and crossed in beautiful shapes, like rivers on a map. Some lines were dark and silent. Others glowed faintly, pulsing with weak life. He whispered, "You are not only broken, you are trying to tell me something." The being answered with light. Soft blue moved across its body, then gold, then faded again. Elias felt something inside his mind, not a voice, not language, more like pictures made of feeling. He saw tall crystal towers under twin suns. He saw fields that shimmered like frozen oceans. He saw many beings of light walking like slow music. Cities that sang instead of buzzed, roads that shone like mirrors. Then the pictures changed. Saw fire in the sky, black shadows, sharp weapons cutting through crystal, towers falling and shattering like glass on stone. He felt fear that was not his own, old and deep. And again one idea came clear and hard like a bell. If the keystone dies, the city dies. Elias looked at the being with new understanding. This was not just a traveler. It was a center, a heart, a living key that held many others together. If it broke, many lives far away would fall with it. He placed his hand near its surface and spoke gently. "I will try." He remembered something from an old book. Long ago he had read about an ancient art. In that art, people did not throw away broken cups. They filled the cracks with gold. They did not hide the damage. They honored it. The broken lines became beauty. The object became stronger than before. The word rose in his mind like a warm light, kintsugi. He looked again at the crystal fractures. They were not ugly. They were paths of survival, marks of struggle, proof that this being had lived through something terrible and was still here, still shining, still asking for help. He smiled softly. "Then we will not hide your cracks," he said. "We will make them your strength." He tested one small tuning fork and touched it near a crack. The being answered with a faint tone, a trembling note of light. Elias understood. Sound and light were connected in this body. He tapped again, changed pitch, watched how the glow moved. Slowly a pattern appeared. The cracks were like strings of a strange instrument. Each one held pain, but also held voice. Outside, villagers walked past his door, but did not enter. They spoke in low voices. Some said Elias had lost his mind. Some said he worked with a demon. Some were afraid the army would come. But inside the workshop there was no fear, only fragile hope and careful work. Hour by hour Elias learned the language of cracks. He saw that some fractures were fresh and sharp, others old and healed. He followed the deepest one that ran from the being's shoulder to its center. That line pulsed weakly, like a tired heartbeat. If that line broke, all light would go dark. He cleaned around it as he would clean a delicate clock, slow, patient, never forcing. never rushing. The being watched him. Its inner light grew a little brighter when his work was right, and dimmed when he touched wrong places. Together they found a rhythm, a human craftsman and a dying crystal alien. Two lives from different worlds meeting in the language of patience. Elias mixed clear resin he used for glass work. He did not pour it. He used a thin brush drawing it gently across the smallest cracks while humming soft tunes under his breath. The humming calmed his hands and strangely, the being too. Its glow steadied and the painful sharp sounds became softer, almost like a lullaby. At one moment Elias stopped. He felt the being press something into his mind again. This time it was not pictures of cities, it was one single feeling, deep gratitude. Mixed with fear not of him, but of time running out. The largest fracture at the center pulsed fast. Like light trapped in breaking ice, Elias nodded. "I know. Your heart is failing," he said quietly. "But we will reach it. We will not hurry, and we will not stop." He drew back, looked at his small workshop filled with tools, dust, and old clocks. It was not a grand lab, not a starship. Yet here in this simple place something great was happening. No council, no army, no scientists. Only one man with steady hands and an alien made of light and crystal. He thought of all the things humans were called in the galaxy. Dangerous, strange, wild. Then he smiled. Maybe one day someone would also call them something else, fixers of the broken. The crystal being glowed faintly at those thoughts, as if it heard him. Light traveled through some cracks and stopped at the deepest line leading to its heart. Elias knew the hardest part was still ahead. The most delicate work had not even begun. But he was not afraid. He rolled up his sleeves, lifted his tools, and listened again to the music of cracks. Asterisk night returned before Elias even noticed. Time slipped away like sand while he worked. Lamps burned low in the workshop, throwing warm light across wood, tools, and the shining body on the table. The crystal being glowed with a slow, gentle pulse, still weak, but steadier than before. Elias felt the tiredness in his bones, yet his hands did not shake. His whole life had led to this kind of moment. Quiet, careful, unseen by the world, but heavy with meaning. He opened the drawers of his workbench. Inside were simple things, old tools that had belonged to his father and grandfather. Small files, soft brushes, tiny screwdrivers, and pieces of cloth worn thin by years of use. He ran his fingers over them as if greeting old friends. These tools had fixed clocks that had stopped at moments of love or loss. They had repaired violins that once again sang in warm rooms. Now they would try to help a dying being from the stars. He also brought out stranger items he rarely used: clear polishing resin, thin golden wire, small lenses and prisms that bent light in delicate ways. On a high shelf sat a wooden box he had not opened in years. He lifted the lid with care. Inside were fragments of broken glass art from long ago. Experiments that had failed, but still shone with color. He took some pieces and held them up. The crystal being reflected them, answering with soft inner light. "You see," Elias whispered, "beauty can be born from broken things." The being made a faint, chiming sound. Not words, but it felt like agreement. Its cracks still glowed with fragile life. Some thin, some deep and dangerous. Elias leaned closer, placing different prisms between the lamp and the alien body. Light split into many colors, sliding like water across the fractured surface. He watched how each color moved into certain lines, avoiding others. It was like the being was choosing which light it needed. He understood something new then. This was not stone or simple crystal. It was living structure woven of light, sound, and fragile matter. It did not want to be repaired by force. It wanted to be understood. So he set aside the rougher tools and chose only the most gentle ones. Brushes of soft hair, tiny wooden sticks. Instruments made not to cut but to guide. He took a deep breath and began his slow work again. He hummed softly, not any song he knew. Just a simple human sound that matched the rhythm of the being's glow. When his tune rose, the light brightened. When it fell, the light rested. A strange harmony filled the workshop. a song of man and alien trying together not to lose hope. He reached a wide crack on the being's right side. It pulsed like a quiet storm. He touched near it with the back of his fingers first. As he would touch a frightened animal, the being did not pull away. Elias mixed a tiny amount of resin, warmed it with his hands, and with a thin brush guided it along the crack. The resin was clear, but when it touched the glowing lines, it caught the light and shone like liquid stars. The wound did not vanish, but it became calmer, stronger, longer spreading. Outside, the world went on without knowing what happened inside this small shop. The wind moved in the trees, distant dogs barked, and somewhere a clock tower rang the hour. No soldiers came, no scientists knocked. For the galaxy, this night was nothing special. But for one crystalline life and one human craftsman, it was a turning point. The being suddenly trembled. A sharp tone burst from it, bright and painful like glass breaking. Elias stopped at once. He saw the reason near its center. The deepest fracture flickered wildly. That was the heart line, the keystone of its life. Every other crack bent toward it like rivers to the sea. He knew then that everything he had done so far was only preparation. The real work would be here, on the edge of ruin and miracle. He closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered his childhood. Sitting with his grandfather, learning to fix a delicate watch, the old man had said, "The smaller the thing, the greater the care it asks for." Elias smiled softly. "The more precious the life, the greater the care it deserves," he whispered. "Now." He picked up a tuning fork and struck it lightly. A soft tone filled the room. The crystal being answered with a trembling light. He changed the pitch, again and again, until one pure note caused the wild flicker of the heart fracture to slow. He held that note steady, letting it vibrate through the air, through his bones, through the alien body. Then with his other hand, he guided a hair-thin line of golden wire along the fracture's edge, not to bind it closed, but to give it strength. A path for light to follow instead of scatter. The being's glow deepened. Colors that had been dull now brightened like dawn after storm. The painful tone softened and became music. Elias felt warmth spread through the room, not heat from fire, but warmth of life returning where it had nearly ended. He did not know alien science. He did not know great theories. He only knew hands, patience, kindness, and respect for fragile things, and somehow, that was enough to stand between death and survival. He worked until his shoulders ached and his eyes watered. Still he did not stop. The being watched him with its deep pools of light, trust clear inside them, for the first time since it fell. From the sky, its glow did not fade at the edges. It held steady, weak but proud. Elias smiled, tired and joyful all at once. "You are not done yet," he said gently, "and neither am I." In that quiet little workshop, filled with old wood and ticking clocks, a human craftsman continued his careful fight against the breaking of a star-born life. He did not know what powers hunted this being. He did not know what danger his choice would bring. He only knew one simple truth that guided his every motion. Nothing that wishes to live should be left alone in its breaking. Dawn crept across the sky, pale and quiet, but the world around Elias did not feel calm. The air itself seemed to wait, as if listening for something far away. Inside the workshop, the crystal being glowed with a steadier light. Not strong yet, but alive. Elias felt hope growing in his chest, fragile and bright. He wiped his hands on a cloth and smiled softly at his strange guest. The worst cracks had stopped spreading. The heart line was still weak, but no longer breaking. Then the ground gave a small, distant tremor. The glass in the window rattled. The clocks on the walls shivered. Elias froze. His first thought was simple and heavy. They are not alone anymore. He stepped outside. The morning light had a strange color. High clouds shimmered with faint, unnatural reflections. Birds were gone. The forest was silent in a way it had never been before. From far above came a low, humming sound, deep and cold. It grew stronger each second, rolling through the air like thunder made of metal. Villagers ran into the streets, pointing to the sky. Fear filled their voices. Children cried. Dogs barked and then hid. Elias followed their eyes upward. Through the thin clouds, dark shapes appeared. Smooth and sharp, not human planes, not anything built on Earth. 3 ships hovered like shadows carved from night. They did not blaze with fire. They glided with quiet, terrible confidence. He did not need the crystal being to tell him who they were. He felt it in his bones. These were not rescuers. These were hunters. He rushed back inside the workshop. The being was already brighter. Its light flickered in fast, frightened pulses. The air around it vibrated with a warning sound. Elias placed his hands near its cracked surface. "I know," he whispered. "They are here for you." The being sent a sharp image into his mind. Black ships cutting through crystal cities, towers shattering, screams like breaking mirrors. The same enemies, the same hunger to erase, not conquer. Elias looked at the tongue. Door of his small shop. A simple piece of wood between him and beings from the stars. He could feel fear rise in his throat like ice. He was one man, with old tools and tired hands, facing ships that crossed galaxies, but another feeling rose higher than fear. He would not hand over the wounded. He moved fast, covering lamps, drawing curtains, letting only a thin strip of light remain. He shifted shelves, pulled down cloths, and made thick shadows in the room. Then he spoke gently to the being. "We must be very quiet now." The being dimmed its glow until it was only a faint breath of light. Almost invisible in the dark, even weak, it tried to protect him. And that touched Elias more than words ever could. Outside, something heavy landed in the village square. The ground shook again. Voices shouted, then fell silent. Not human silence, but forced silence. Elias heard strange footsteps, metal scraping on stone, and a thin, cold hiss like knives being drawn. A harsh, broken language cut the air. He could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Search. He held his breath. His workshop door rattled as shadows moved past. A bright beam of alien light swept the windows. He pressed himself against the wall beside the crystal being. He could feel its fear, but also its trust. It knew that this simple human was choosing to stand with it, even against the sky. The door handle moved, once, twice, then stopped. The hunters moved on. For a moment it seemed they would leave, but then a new sound came, deeper and heavier. A leader, Elias thought. A presence that made the air colder. The footsteps returned, slower now, certain. The handle turned again, harder. The wood creaked. Elias whispered, "No, not to them, but to the idea of giving up." The door burst open. Cold white light flooded the room. Tall figures stood there, long arms, smooth black armor, faces like sharp edges with no eyes a human could read. Their weapons looked like pieces of night shaped into spears. One of them stepped forward, its head tilted as it saw the glowing shape on the table under cloth and shadow. The being shivered. Its light flared for a heartbeat, then dimmed again. The hunter raised its weapon. Elias moved without thinking. He stood between them, his back to the crystal being, hands spread wide. His voice shook, but he did not step aside. "No," he said, simple and clear. They did not speak his language, but they understood his body, his stance, his refusal. One hunter pushed him. He stumbled but did not fall. He came back to the same place, standing like a small wall of flesh and bone against cold metal. They hissed, annoyed at this weak creature in their path. One lifted its weapon again. The room filled with sharp light. And then something changed. The crystal being behind Elias glowed brighter than it had since its crash. Not wild, not breaking, but strong and focused. A deep, beautiful tone filled the workshop, not loud, but powerful in a way that went under the skin. The light moved through its repaired cracks, along golden lines and clear resin, and burst outward in a soft wave. The hunters froze. Their weapons vibrated, cracked, then shattered into glittering dust. The white searchlights flickered and died. One by one, the tall figures stepped back, not in pain but in shock. For the first time they seemed unsure. Elias did not know what he had helped create. He only knew this. A dying being was no longer only dying. The hunters turned and fled out the door, calling to their ships in harsh, broken sounds. The sky rumbled again as the dark shapes pulled away. Not in victory, but in fear of something they could not control. In the quiet that followed, Elias turned to the crystal being. Its glow softened, warm and alive. The deepest fracture still waited for final repair. But now there was strength behind it. They had been tested not by tools, but by choice, and together they had refused to surrender. The village slowly returned to sound. Voices rising like wind after a storm, but inside the workshop everything was quiet again. Elias leaned against the table, breathing hard. His hands trembled now that danger had passed. Fear always came late for him. After the work was done, he looked at the open door, then slowly closed it and slid the bolt into place. The world outside could wait. Inside, a more fragile battle still needed him. He turned back to the crystal being. Its glow was brighter than ever, but not wild. It was steady, warm, alive. Light moved gently through the repaired lines like golden rivers finding their paths. Elias smiled with tired relief. "You are stronger," he whispered. The being answered with a soft tone, not loud, but full, like the first clear note of a song finally sung the right way. Yet his eyes were drawn again to the deepest fracture, the one that ran to the center. That single line pulsed faster now, as if some hidden heart beat inside the crystal body and wanted to be free. Everything they had done had led to this moment. Every brush, every note, every quiet promise. Elias felt it clearly. If he failed here, all the work would fade like smoke. If he succeeded, the being would truly live. He washed his hands, not because of dirt, but because ritual gave focus. He placed his tools in a careful row, as a soldier might line up weapons before a final stand. But his tools were gentle things: brushes, thin rods, tuning forks, lenses, and small bowls of resin. He lit one more lamp and turned down the others, so the light fell only across the center of the crystal being. The room became a circle of warm gold with darkness all around, like a stage for a single act that could not be repeated. The being watched him. Its inner light slowed, matching his calm breathing. Elias placed his hand near the central fracture without touching it. Heat came from it, not burning heat, but the heat of life working very hard to stay. He could feel its fear, not of pain, but of ending. He spoke softly. "We will go slowly, and we will finish together." He began with sound. He lifted a tuning fork and struck it gently. A soft note filled the air. The crystal body answered with a low echo. He changed the pitch, searching, listening, until one note made. The central line calm, not stop, but become regular, like waves on a shore. He held that note again and again, building a rhythm the being could follow. A simple human heartbeat turned into music. Then he took the smallest brush he owned, only a few hairs in width, and dipped it into clear resin warmed by the lamp. His hand hovered in the air for a long moment. This was the smallest movement of his life, and also the largest. Finally he touched the edge of the fracture. Only a point, only a breath of pressure. The being gave a sharp, bright flare, then relaxed. It had hurt, but it had not broken. He worked slowly along the line, not trying to close it, only guiding it, shaping it, giving it strength and direction. The resin caught the light and glowed, like liquid dawn running through cracked ice. As he moved, memories that were not his own came again. Not images this time, but emotions, a mother's pride, children's laughter like wind chimes, cities singing together when the twin suns rose. Then fear, running, silence. He felt tears on his face, but he did not stop. He was mending. More than crystal, he was mending a story that had nearly ended. At the center of the being lay something like a small sun. Hidden by cracks, its light throbbed gently, waiting. Elias knew this was the heart node, the keystone inside the keystone. His hands stilled. He rested them on the table to steady himself. He remembered his grandfather's voice again. "When the work is hardest, your hands must be softest." He laughed quietly through his tears. "And your courage must be quiet." He added on his own. He touched the heart fracture. The room filled with pure light, not blinding, but complete. Every shadow melted into color. Every clock stopped as if time bowed its head. A deep tone rose from the crystal being, rich and wide, filling the space, filling his chest, filling the world. Elias felt as if he stood inside music. The resin glowed gold. The golden wire hummed. And all the repaired cracks joined their voices. For one terrible second he felt it might shatter from its own power. He whispered, "Stay," not as a command but as a plea. The being answered, not in words but in calm. The light settled, still bright, still strong, but no longer wild. The central fracture sealed into a shining line. Not hidden, not erased, transformed into a path of golden fire. The crystal being lifted slightly from the table, not by hands, but by its own rising strength. Weight turned into grace. It stood, glowing like a living star caught in human walls. Elias stepped back, his heart beating hard. The being faced him, its light gathered and shaped itself. And for the first time he heard a voice made for human ears, soft, layered, like many small bells speaking together. "Craftsman," it said, "you gave me back my heart." Elias laughed and almost cried at once. "No," he answered simply, "you already had a heart. I only helped it shine again." Outside the sky was clear and wide, but somewhere far beyond it, signals were already traveling across the dark sea of space. A crystal world would soon feel a lost rhythm return, a heartbeat of light they had thought gone forever. And here, in a small wooden workshop on a quiet planet, a human man set down his brush with shaking, grateful hands. The greatest repair of his life was no longer a hope. It was done. The world felt different, even though nothing in the workshop had changed. The wooden walls were the same. The tools were the same. The clock still hung silent. Yet the air seemed wider, brighter, alive. The crystal being stood on its own now. No longer a fragile body lying on the table. Light flowed through it like living water. Every crack now a golden line of strength instead of a wound. Elias watched in quiet wonder. His whole life had been about small things, tiny gears, and thin glass, slow work, and simple days. He had never imagined he would stand in front of a living star in the shape of a crystal being. Repaired by his own hands, he did not feel like a hero. He felt like a craftsman who had simply finished a job he had promised to do. The being slowly raised its arms, testing a body that was once broken but now whole. Its movements were graceful and careful, as if it respected every new line of strength. Colors moved across it. Blue, silver, gold. Then new colors that human eyes had no names for. The room filled with soft sound. Not loud music, but a gentle harmony. A sound that made the heart feel less alone. Outside the workshop door, the village stayed quiet. People did not yet know whether to celebrate, hide, or pray. The hunters had gone, their dark ships shrinking into the sky. But everyone felt that something greater still waited unseen. Some stood in doorways, not daring to come closer. Others looked toward Elias's shop as if it were a strange temple where something holy and dangerous had awakened. The crystal being turned its shining face toward Elias. Light gathered where eyes might be, but there were no human features, only depth and warmth. You listened when others turned away. The layered voice said, soft and ringing at the same time, "You touched my breaking without fear." Elias shook his head slowly. "I was afraid," he said honestly, "but I helped anyway." The being glowed brighter for a moment, as if that answer pleased it. "Then your fear had courage as a companion." It replied, "Among my people that is called wisdom." The words were not spoken in any human tongue, yet he heard them as if they had always lived in his mind, carried on light and gentle vibration. The being lifted one arm and touched the air. A wave of pale radiance spread outward, passing through walls and roof without breaking them. Far away, beyond clouds and sky and cold space, that light became a signal, a song sent home, Elias felt. It leave like a distant bell he did not ring. The being's glow softened after sending it, as if it had let out a long breath it had been holding since the crash. They will come, the being said quietly. Not hunters, not destroyers, my own people will follow the echo of my heart. For a short moment, sorrow touched its light. They believed I was gone, and with me, the city that depended on my pattern. Then warmth returned. Now they will live. Elias sat down on his stool at last, feeling the weight of days without sleep. Joy and worry mixed together. I am just one man in a small village, he said, smiling a little. I fix clocks and cups. The being considered him, as if studying a rare and beautiful object. You are more than that, it answered. You are a keeper of continuity. You do not throw away what is cracked. You choose to mend in a wide and violent universe. Such hands are not small. He did not know what to say to that, so he simply nodded. That was enough. A faint rumble rolled across the sky again. Not heavy like the hunter's arrival, but deep and soft. Elias went to the window. He saw distant points of light forming shapes above the clouds. Beautiful and calm, not sharp, not dark. They glowed like floating fragments of sunrise. His heart tightened. Your people, he whispered. The being stood straighter. Its light became clear and strong, full of pride that did not crush. Yes, it said, and they will see that I was not saved by armies or machines, but by a human craftsman and his quiet workshop. There was gratitude in its tone, but also something else, respect, a promise unspoken. The door opened slowly, not by Elias, but by a soft push of warm wind. The villagers outside gasped as they saw the crystal figure standing tall in the golden light. No one screamed this time. Fear did not vanish, but it changed. It became awe. Children peeked from behind their parents, eyes wide. Some old people crossed their hearts, whispering prayers not out of terror but of wonder. Elias did not stand in front of the being now. He stood beside it, not its shield but its friend. That simple change meant everything. The being's light spread over the village square, touching broken fences, cracked stones, tired faces, not healing everything, not changing the world with magic, but reminding everyone that what is broken does not always end. Above them, the new ships waited in silence. They did not descend with weapons. They simply watched, listening for the last signal. The being turned its bright face to the sky, then back to Elias. There is one more thing, it said gently, a gift from my people to yours. Elias raised an eyebrow, half amused, half curious. What could beings of crystal give to people of wood and iron? He asked softly. The being's answer was simple. A story. Light flared again, rising like dawn over the village. Every person felt it in their chest, not as sound or picture, but as knowing that somewhere in the endless dark there were lives made of crystal and song, and they remembered that a human with simple hands had once repaired a dying star heart. That knowing would not fade. The awakening was not just the crystal being standing whole again. It was the moment the universe learned something new about humans. Asterisk. The new crystal ships hung above the clouds like quiet suns. Their light touched the edges of the world without burning it. Soft colors flowed across the sky. Gentle and strange, the villagers stared with open mouths. Some knelt, others simply held one another. Nobody ran this time. The fear that once ruled their hearts now shared space with wonder. Elias stood in front of his workshop, the old wood behind him and the glowing being beside him. He felt small and steady at the same time, like a single stone in a great river that still refuses to move. The crystal being's light had changed again, no longer the weak flicker of survival. It was calm power now, deep and full, but never cruel. Slowly, beams of soft light reached down from the waiting ships. They were not ladders and not weapons. They were bridges made of glow. From them descended other crystalline figures, taller, different in shape and color, each one carrying its own music inside. They touched the ground without sound. The air around them whispered like wind through glass forests. The villagers held their breath. Elias did too. Then something very simple happened. The first of the new beings bowed its shining head to him. Not to armies, not to governments, not to heroes sung in songs, but to a tired man with resin on his hands and a worn apron around his waist. The repaired being stepped forward, golden lines bright across its body like constellations. "This is the one," it said, its voice clear and layered. He mended what others would have left to shatter. He gave me back my heart when the galaxy had already written my ending. The others glowed in answer. A soft chorus filled the air. Music that was not quite heard and not quite seen. The words did not matter. The meaning did. Gratitude, respect, promise. Elias flushed like a boy caught doing something kind in secret. "I only did what my hands know how to do," he said. Quietly, "I fix broken things." The tallest crystal being answered. "Then know this, human craftsman. There are few greater arts in any world." Its light touched Elias gently. Not burning, but warm and steady. Old aches in his shoulders eased. The tiredness in his hands softened. Not erased, just honored. Like a gift returned in the same language. Together the crystal beings surrounded their healed companion. They examined the golden cracks, the clear resin, the careful work. They did not hide the repaired lines or feel shame. Instead they marveled, for among their kind, a life remade is not something to hide, but something to celebrate. The broken path had become part of the song. The repaired being looked once more around the small village, at the crooked fences, the dusty road, the curious faces. Then it turned to Elias. "I will go home now," it said gently. "A city waits for my pattern to return. Many will rise because I am whole again." For a moment its light dimmed with emotion. "But I will carry your craft in my core. The story of your hands will travel with me." Elias felt both pride and sadness. At those words, "Then go," he said softly, "and live." He did not try to hold it back. Repair is not ownership. He knew that truth better than anyone. When something is fixed, it must return to its world. The crystal beings rose slowly on pillars of light. The villagers watched as if watching the ending of winter, not with despair, but with quiet hope, before entering the ships. The repaired being sent one last wave of warm radiance across the village. Cracked windows gleamed instead of dull. Broken tools seemed lighter. And for a moment, every person felt a gentle pressure behind the heart, like a silent promise. You are not alone in the dark. Then the ships lifted higher, their glow becoming small stars. And then only sky remained. Silence returned. But it was not the same silence as before. It was full of aftermusic, full of meaning. The villagers slowly turned their eyes toward Elias. No one laughed at the quiet craftsman anymore. No one called him strange for loving broken things. They did not cheer loudly. They simply nodded to him the way people nod to mountains. Elias went back inside his workshop. He placed his tools away one by one. He brushed the table clean. There was a small circle of light left on the wood where the crystal being once lay. Not real light. More like a memory the room itself refused to forget. He did not wipe it away. He sat down at his bench. An old clock waited there. Its hand stuck at some forgotten hour. He smiled and picked it up. Work continued. The universe was huge, and many things would break again. Somewhere out there crystal beings sang, and somewhere here human hearts worried about simple days. But the line between small and great no longer mattered. To him, across distant stars, a legend had already begun to grow. They spoke of a world of water and trees, of a village at the edge of a forest, of hunters who failed and light that rose again. And at the center of the story stood not a general, not a king, not a scientist, but a human craftsman who looked at a dying star heart and said, with steady hands, "I fix broken things."